Hi, everyone. So happy to be with you. Hope everyone is doing great. I want to start off by welcoming you to our Cafecito Session, a show that explores education justice through a New Mexico lens. I'm Loretta, your host, and today we will be talking with Mishelle Jurado about education and wellness. A little bit about me. I'm a history teacher turned executive director with 20 years experience working in the classroom with both middle and high school students. I'm passionate about culturally responsive teaching and education justice, and I'm elated to elevate these topics through these live-streamed Cafecito sessions. The coalition, Transform Education in Mexico, is a statewide organization that works to inform government leaders and educational decision makers about policy changes in education that center students and their well-being. Our coalition was founded as a result of a landmark Yazzie Martinez court ruling. Today marks the 5th anniversary of the court ruling. In this historic case, the court ordered the state to provide the programs, services, and resources necessary for students to be college and career ready, and to address deep inequities for low-income students, our Native American students, Hispanic, English language learners, and special needs students. We want these Cafecito sessions to be conversational, so if you're tuning in through Facebook Live or Twitter, please join us. Put questions, comments, words of encouragement, anything you want to say that contributes to the conversation in the chat. And now I have the great honor of introducing Mishelle Jurado. She's someone who brings a refreshing perspective on critical pedagogy, dual language, and the educator side of bilingual education. So without any further ado, hola, amiga.
¿Qué onda, chica?
Oh, just here, getting ready to have this great conversation. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Enjoying this crazy heat, but not really. I'm in my house, so it's good.
Well, we're two hot Chicana Mexicanas, and I hope we can unpack some of the issues tied to education equity, and specifically wellness, and all of the ways that implicate identity, language, histories, all of the things that you know so much about. Can you kind of get us started by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you first and foremost for having me here. I think TENM is a great space to be able to engage in very important conversations about education for our students here in New Mexico. I really appreciate the call out to Chicana Mexicana identity, although I don't really use that, though I'm like an adopted one. Originally from the Umatilla Nation in Eastern Oregon and raised as this white chick in Oregon. And then throughout my life's journey have understood a little bit more about my mestiza identity, but I don't deny that white part of me either. Coming into New Mexico for the last 20 plus years as a bilingual educator in Albuquerque Public Schools at 3 high schools. So I taught Spanish in a lot of multiple spaces, but for the most part as Spanish language arts in dual language programs. And been involved in a lot with biliteracy seal work here in New Mexico at the state and local levels and in the school systems. Some of my most proudest work is working with biliteracy seals and students who achieve that honor. I'm a doctoral student at the University of New Mexico, working on my doctoral degree. It's a journey. I'll just say that it's a journey. But really looking at teachers and understanding who teachers are, specifically Spanish language arts teachers who teach at the high school level. Teaching Spanish in the United States is it's not an easy feat. There's a lot, and especially here in New Mexico, right? There's a huge history with the Spanish language. And so just kind of delving into that and identity development and what does that really mean in the spaces of education. I'm also a mom. I got 2 kids who are bilingual, and they're 22 and 25, but their bilingualness doesn't stop when they finish school. So my house is like I always say you can like put a little camera up and catch a lot of little jokes that are constantly going around because we move from Spanglish to English to Spanish. I have familia here from Mexico this weekend. We've been speaking Spanish all week long. And my little sobrinitos are here and they're like, Tia, ¿qué dijo? Because we were just Costco, they're like, ¿Qué dijo? And I'm like, well, let's talk about what they said. But and then just someone who serves her community. This is my community. It's somewhere where I feel accepted, embraced, and um, I work at the national level too with emergent bilingual development and language development and professional learning spaces for teachers when they're working with linguistically and culturally diverse students. And those are always interesting spaces to come into to see at the national level how I always come back to New Mexico, and I'm so grateful for what we have here.
Mm-hmm.
I come back and my feet hit the ground, and I'm just like, I think the creator, I think my family, my community, my friends, and just say, wow, we do amazing things in New Mexico, and people don't always realize how much amazing work we do here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Well,
kind
thank
of
you.
like in a nutshell. And I have 4 dogs. Maybe that's it. I have 4 bilingual dogs.
Ooh, I bet they probably know how to dance a little. Thank you for giving us that fuller sense of your story, how you've kind of changed over time. Identities, we change, we grow. And part of what I wanted to kick us off with is a question about defining wellness. And wellness, I think, is a really important angle for us to explore, because when we think about this as the 5th year anniversary of the court ruling in the Martinez-Yazzie case, there are 4 groups that were named, and one of the 4 stakeholder groups were English language learners. And so over these last 5 years, there's been a lot of advocacy, which people who are in organizations that are doing and have done that good work. And so I'm just interested in how would someone like you define wellness, looking at education through that lens?
I think that's a very complicated question. Mm-hmm. Multilingual families, bilingual families, and I can speak from my family, and I can speak from families that I work with, but I can't give the answer to everything. I can just kind of give my little view of that world that I live in. Mm-hmm. And how we maneuver through our spaces is very distinct. There's a lot of intersectionalities that go into it. Immigration status, gender, racial configurations, in the sense of how do I look? I'm going to be treated differently than maybe my husband who looks completely different, right? Mm-hmm. All of these things are different. And when I think about wellness, things that I do in my own home with my children is, having really honest, open conversations, bringing things to the table when we see things that are unjust, raising children who are social justice seekers. I consider myself a social justice seeker of always, being able to name that elephant in the room. And so when I think about the students I serve, in a lot of different capacities, I still see a lot of the same stories happening after 20 years. Mm-hmm. And that kind of hurts my chest, because I do think we have advanced in the last 20 years. There's been amazing work done in New Mexico. But there's still this fight with the dominant ideology, and a dominant maybe way of thinking, right? That, English is the only way to be successful. Mm-hmm. That is wrong. I use English when I need to use English. I'm going to quote my dear friend, Dr. Jose Medina. I mobilize all of my languages depending on what context I need to do, right? And I have that privilege to be able to do it. But not all of our kids can do that, nor can their families, because sometimes of fear, sometimes of, being told, you can't do that. Even myself in New Mexico, I've been told, hey, you're in America, speak English. Mm-hmm. And I'd be like, well, really? No. And so I think when we think of wellness for bilingual people, I think we're still seeking that freedom to just be our authentic linguistic selves in all spaces, and not having the fear of going into those spaces, if that makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just like, how can I, like, I code switch all the time, and I don't care. I've come to the point in my life, I'm like, my brain doesn't always function the way the person I'm with needs it to function. It might take me a little bit. And like in the mornings, I tend to speak more Spanish than English. That's just because all night I've been speaking in Spanish, and it's just this how I work. My kids, their love language is Spanglish, and it's beautiful. My son can start in one sentence and end in another, and then yell at another. And this was something, as a bilingual educator, took me a long time to accept, because I used to be a teacher who policed language in her classroom, because and not Spanish but English. I didn't let English be in my spaces, because I was like, you have access to English all the time here. Let's really, use our Spanish. But then I come to some new understandings, some new learnings, some new ways of my own pedagogy, of my own critical space of pedagogy, using translanguaging. And I realized that I wasn't doing my students any good. I needed to accept their whole linguistic selves in the space. And what does that mean, to accept a student's whole linguistic selves? Well, first and foremost, who are your students linguistically? What have been their journeys? What have been their parents' journeys? What have been their grandparents? What are their ancestors' journeys? Do they know? Can we tie it back to indigenous languages? Are they there? A lot of our bilingual kids are actually multilingual. They speak indigenous languages as well, but they hide them because of still these very ignorant thinkings of what it means to be indigenous, instead of being proud of it, thinking it's something that's negative, but which we know is not true, not right. And so I think wellness, in the sense of a bilingual teacher, of serving the Martinez and Yazzie consolidated lawsuit states English language learners. I would hope that we move beyond that word, because it's not about learning English. It's about their emergent bilinguals, their bilingual students, their multilingual people. When we continue to place English as the goal, it's English, then we're not really looking for the wellness of these students, because historically, that has been the most damaging. Talk to any Nuevo Mexicano, yourself included. We've had these conversations. You and I have had these conversations, who may understand some Spanish, but all of the psychological implications of speaking a Spanish that they don't identify with, because it's been erased throughout their thing. So that's not well-being. That's not a linguistic well-being of how do we attend to our children. We attend to by accepting their whole linguistic identity in our classrooms and incorporating it into our pedagogies and curriculum.
Woo! You just said so much. And the one thing that I wanted to kind of reflect with you on, and kind of take us into our next question, is when I ask any question, when we engage in naming something, it always sort of invites, or very subtly, there's a wondering about the opposite. And so much of the way that we talk about language and language identities and English language learners, right, that whole field and that name, is it's looking at it as a deficit. And what you're naming is that in order to really create spaces for all of us to feel safe, we have to move away from a deficit way of looking at language. And so the next question, I guess I want to open our conversation to, is how well are the children in our community? The children that you've worked with, the teachers, all the testimonios that you've experienced and been in community with. How well are our children?
Linguistically, culturally?
However you...
Like, again, it goes back to your question at the beginning, is how do we define well-being? Are we feeding our children? Are we attending to their linguistic and cultural and socio-emotional spaces? Are we attending to their gender identity development? There's so much into this. I teach in the summertime at the University of New Mexico in the Bilingual Institute, the summer Spanish immersion. And every year, I've been doing this for 8 years now, and every year I'm teaching either in-service or pre-service teachers. So teachers either going into teaching or teachers who are at the master's or doctorate level that are teaching. And I'm very much a story-based type of teacher. I want to know your stories because I want to know who you are. And every year I'm just in tears with some of the activities that we do to get to know each other, about the journeys that these young people, and sometimes they're even my age, so I'm still going to say it's young people, but that they've taken linguistically to get where they're at. And no, they haven't been well. They haven't been attended to. They have been made to feel in various points that it's not, that they're not enough. That they're not enough, that they have to choose between one or the other. And for me, I find that to be, life is a journey. Life gives us the opportunities to develop who we are. But if we as a society know that there are barriers that exist in our institutional practices, and that we continue to do it, then we are complicit in the unwellness of our citizens, because we're not deconstructing those institutional practices. And that kind of comes back to educators, right? Whether you're a teacher, you're an administrator, you're a support in some way, is that how do you take care of yourself? How do you know how you have gone through all these institutional practices that we know for Black and Brown and Indigenous spaces have been not good? And that is being nice to say not good.
No.
It's being nice. I could say some other words. We're live and you don't want me to go there. But, right, and so I think you have to get back to how do we humanize our practices, our pedagogies, to get to the wellness that we all deserve and want.
Yes. Yes. And how do we do that? What are some of the ways that organizations you're part of, or maybe in your own training and your own research as a scholar, what are some of the best ways to take care of our kids?
Taking care of ourselves. I think as a mom, I'm going to be 50 this year. It's the big 5-0. Yes. Okay. Yes. 5-0, big 5-0. And the one thing that I have learned, and I have many, I take care of, I'm a caretaker. It's part of who I am. But what I have learned is that I can't take care of anyone unless I myself am well. And as a teacher, especially as someone who feels very heavily, yo me enamoro de los muchachos. I always fall in love with my students. And I always tell them, I am a teacher for life. You choose whether that's in. And from my very first year of teaching 20 years ago at Rio Grande High School, at Rio Grande, I still have students in my life 20 years later that I'm their mentor, an amiga, a madrina, all those types of things, right? To now. And for me, it's always about working from a space of love, and it has to feel good in my heart, and a space of service that I am giving back, but not with the expectation I'm going to receive, but just because that's just me. But that's a hard thing to carry. It's a lot of emotionals. And every 7 years, I've made a shift in my career because I get to a point of burnout. And so something has happened very blessedly, that you can make that shift. But I had to always come back and come like, how do I reboost myself to be able to continue to do the work that is meaningful, that is impactful, and that fulfills me as a human being. And that has been what I've been working on this last year is meditation. That's a really hard one for me, getting my brain there. And I've only been able to get, 3 or 4 minutes here and there. But meditation, walking has been a really, connecting to the land, the smells outside, and silence. Silence has also been something that's been healing for me. Growing up in a very chaotic life, I always thought I needed noise and something always going on, something new. So I just had to kind of learn that silence is okay. But as teachers, I think when I'm working with teachers, because as I'm coaching with teachers, it's one of the things that I ask them is, what do you need to feel peace? What do you need to feel joy? I told you the book I'm reading right now, and the author is asking this idea of joy. Goldie Muhammad, I'll throw her book out there. Go get it. It's amazing. I'll even throw it up here to look at because I'm looking at it. And she talks about joy. And that's what I've been thinking about this whole week before our talk is like, what gives me joy as a teacher? And it's when I can step back and not be in the front. That is the biggest thing. It's the biggest high of being a teacher. When I've set the stage, when I've created the space where I can be a participant and not a leader. I don't want to be the one who's going forward. So I don't like to be the teacher in front of the classroom and everybody, hey, we're going to take notes, but we're going to inquire, we're going to join, and the kids are learning, and they're the ones who are shaping the space. And I think about that as teaching is such a phenomenal feeling, and it brings so much to your heart. But then the other is when I'm collaborating, and when it's true collaboration where we're getting down and we're building those for that to happen. That there's multiple people coming to the table and nos cambiamos de un lenguaje a otro y mira que vamos a hacer esto and what do you think about that, and oh, hey, did you read this? That I love collaboration. There is nothing more beautiful, but I don't think teachers get enough of it in a sense that they can be an owner of it. There's so many things. Oh, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. There's so much checklisting, and when we get into a checklisting mentality, it can sometimes take away our joy of the art and science of teaching. Because we have incredible teachers in New Mexico, incredible teachers. I have said it time and time again. The colleagues that I have worked with over the last 20 years have been people who have formed me, who I have mentored, and I walk away from their classes going, oh my God, the pre-services teachers that I teach, and they text me their classroom pictures, because teaching is a calling, and they get into it and they find that joy. But we have to come back and ask ourselves that question, what Muhammad asks us. Where is it? What is it? What does it do? How do we unpack that? Does that make sense? And because we should, and COVID was hard. COVID was hard. COVID, though, I believe, gave us the opportunity to historically change the U.S. educational system to be a 21st century educational system instead of a 19th century educational system. But we're still shifting. What does that look like, and what is it, and how do we create it? And there's conversations of you got to give up power. That I had to give up a lot of power for that joyous moment of teaching and learning. That took me a long time to develop. But when it happened, oh my God, it's beautiful.
It is. Thank you for reminding me of that. That I wouldn't have thought of that as the way you did. And you're right that when there were moments where people would walk in my classroom and say, where's your teacher? Right? Because the learning was happening and they couldn't quickly identify where I was. You're right. That was my most uplifted sense of really being an educator, like a knowledge creator, knowledge sharer. Those are things that I thought of myself as. Whereas I think when we're looking at education from an outcomes perspective, we're thinking a lot about teachers as kind of like that banking system of knowledge that Freire talks about, just sort of approaching their young people in their room as if they don't already know anything or they don't know very much, and sort of that idea that they're charged with this.
Especially our language learners. Especially our language learners.
Right.
There's so many teachers who think, well, they don't know English, so they
Right.
can't do it. And I'm like, no.
Right.
I had this one girl one time came from Chihuahua. You know, she's a U.S. born citizen, but she was raised in Chihuahua, and she's coming back to be able to be in this space. She ultimately, I think, went back to Chihuahua. She wasn't really happy here, but she was top 2% of Chihuahua, top 2%. I saw her transcripts and all this stuff, and she was in a class, and the teacher was like, well, she can't do it because she can't speak English. Mm-hmm. And then I go, well, you know, and we talked through some strategies and things like that. And about 6 weeks later that she came back, she goes, wow, she's really smart. She gets it. And I'm like, yeah, because 89% of saying the content are cognates between English and Spanish, and you just need to make the connection so she can say, oh, así se hace, esto ya me lo sé, y así lo voy a hacer. Just because you don't understand it doesn't mean that knowledge and richness is not in the student. They may just need to learn another way of doing it in English, but how you provide that opportunity is either going to make them completely successful or make them just kind of shut down and say, you know what, I'm just going to come here and be what I need to be, and that's it. But that has a lot to do with the teacher.
Absolutely. And I think what you've helped me think through is the way that you kind of presented wellness as being this feeling of being whole and being accepted in that fullness. And then you kind of take us through this idea that educators are, when we think about whether or not our kids are well, you kind of are saying, well, teaching starts with ourselves, right? The question is that really comes before that maybe is, are we as educators able to be well? And so we're running kind of close to the end of our time together, but I want to see if we can connect that to a closing question. If there's one thing you could change about education, what would that be?
Oh my gosh, that's
I know.
That's like a really hard one to do. So just because of your connection with the wellness piece, there's a quote by Bell Hooks that I absolutely adore, where she said, you cannot have empowered children without empowered teachers. And so if there were things that I could change about education, it would be that it is a teacher asset-based space. Because without teachers, we don't have an educational system. Without educators, without administrators, without people who understand the art of pedagogical design, we don't have an educational system. And so if we could have an educational system that uplifted, that supported, that provided the continuous learning, because I think as an educator, you have to be on top of your game and you need to know current research in the field of education. If you're still doing the same quiz that you did 20 years ago, you're not doing it right, because we're not teaching the students of 20 years ago. We're teaching a different group of kids, right? And again, I'm a bilingual educator. For me, education should be bilingual education. We are not a strand. We are not a program. We are not some little hallway over in there. We're not some little hallway, and we're not a little closet to put us in.
Amen.
We are the bilingual education is education, and actually we need more bilingual education. Very quickly, I just want to tell you this. Last year, I've been working with PDK International, with Educators Rising, doing some work here in New Mexico about growing our own bilingual and Native American teachers. And they just had their national conference in Orlando, Florida. And when I took this position and stepped away from APS for a bit, I did it for New Mexico. I did it because this is my passion. I want more bilingual teachers in New Mexico. But after attending, unfortunately in Florida, but Florida, And I got to look at 90 students do this competition called Educators Rising Moment, where high school, middle school, and collegiate students come in and say in 3 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes, what was the moment that you knew you wanted to be an educator? And I listened to these 90 kids that I did, and then another group did 90. And of the 90 that I heard, all of them wanted to be seen, and an educator saw them and made them feel like they were a human being. And I would say about 45 of them came from distinct bilingual, multilingual, multicultural backgrounds, and they also wanted to be heard in their language.
Oh.
And so I started that out for New Mexico, but after that experience, this is for all kids in the United States. Any child who is denied the right to speak the language of their parents, of their grandparents, I think we are committing a crime for allowing that to happen. And so let's grow them, let's build them. Quit being afraid of people speaking languages around you that you don't understand. It's a beautiful thing, right? Unpack that if that's what you're feeling. If it's you who is feeling uncomfortable, then you need to do the work in yourself. But
Amen.
we have it to change. We have it to be a model here in New Mexico.
Amen. I couldn't have said it better. And I think that's why our coalition is, I think, at the forefront of calling for transformation, and not in the way of a hierarchical way, but from community, understanding that the cultural richness that we have in our communities is going to and could set us apart. It could fundamentally shift our position in terms of outcomes. You know, I'm not a person that thinks the outcomes should drive the thinking, right? Getting better proficiency rates isn't going to lead to this kind of innovation that you're talking about.
Even the varieties of English that we speak
in our state,
and in our country, those varieties of English are what make us unique.
Yes.
Right? So this idea of standardization, language, we don't exist without language. And that's what impulses our identity. That's everything. I had some girls from Kentucky who built a board, and they're like, we don't have any bilingual in our students, but we think that students should have access to their language at home. Are we right? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. And these three beautiful young women talking about, they're like, they had so many questions that they said, and they said in their space, but they don't teach us.
Right.
What does that mean? And they're like, what is the border like? And like, how can we build these bridges so people can understand, so we can understand each other and respect each other and honor each other in all of our linguistic and cultural glory?
Yes.
Right? Because we're all beautiful people.
Yes.
We all have amazing things. And just, lastly, to kind of convince, I've gotten to work with some of the indigenous communities here in New Mexico this last year. And we have so much, we need to really, truly understand what it means to be allies to our Native sisters and brothers in their fight to keep their languages and cultures alive. And that is something that has become very true. And being born myself on indigenous land and not understanding my connection to it until now, I'm starting to get into my late 40s and 50s. You get a bit of resentment of, why didn't I get it? Well, because history doesn't like that.
Right.
Families don't like that.
Right.
But the amazing indigenous educators that exist in this state, I'm in awe of them.
Thank you for creating taking the moment to acknowledge the beauty of that work that's happening. It's not just in one Native community, it's in multiple places. They're all very concerned about the their languages surviving. And our education system is, I think, in serious need of an internal, limpia.
Yeah.
Right?
The curandera, the sage.
Yes.
They need to hit every spiritual piece and then just make it and bring through, because I don't know if you do this, I do this, I bring holy water, I bring sage, I bring, palo alto, and just to kind of clean the spaces, because the hurt that exists,
Yes.
pain that exists, we still have children who are living this in 2023. We still have children in the state of New Mexico being told, you need to learn English in a way that makes them feel like, wait a minute, you mean, so no child should have to lose a language to gain a language, right? So we need to make sure that they have equitable access in as of teachers, as of curriculum. And I'm not talking about store-bought curriculum.
Yes, thank you.
I'm not talking about store-bought curriculum.
No.
I think that curriculum should be built by the educators
Responsive to the community. Yes.
with authentic texts, that they can do in multiple languages. But teachers need that space and time.
Yes.
Just please understand that work takes time. Building curriculum, and this is why teachers go to store-bought curriculum, because they're tired. They're tired for whatever reason. So it takes time. Give them that time and pay them for it.
Yes.
For that.
Yes, you're hitting all the high notes, and clearly we can talk for.
Yes, you and I can.
No, we can.
So we're finishing up.
Many cafecitos. So I want to just say thank you so much for just your contributions to our to the story, right? The whole point of this plática is to kind of shine that light on the way that the solutions that come from our own experts and our own scholars, our own knowledge keepers, and I consider you one of them. So thank you for
having me,
magnifying the space and opening it up, and really hopefully as this gets shared and other people watch, there's a deeper understanding of what we mean when we say let's transform schools.
Yeah.
And you named it in so many beautiful ways. So I want to go ahead and just kind of round things out and say, thank you all for tuning in. There are so many advocates for education and for education equity in New Mexico that are fighting the good fight. And that's exactly who we want to highlight and amplify. If you want to join us for a future cafecito, or if you know someone who would make a great guest, please let us know. You can find us on social at TransformEdNM. And you can also go to our website, www.transformedutionnm.org. Join us again soon. I look forward to having another cafecito, and I don't think this is the last we'll see of you, Mishelle. I invite you to be part of these pláticas with me more and more. Okay. And I want to just say thank you and goodbye. And if you want to send us off, Mishelle.
You know what? I just want to thank you, Loretta, for the work that you do and your team. And I just want to say bendiciones for all of the teachers starting a new school year, getting ready. We're starting earlier than we ever have before. And just teachers out there, take a moment to breathe, to take a walk, tell stories to each other, build community, center yourself in community, center yourself in joy, center yourself in love. And it will be easier, I promise. But bendiciones for you all, that you have a most blessed school year 2023-24.
Yes. Thank you, Mishelle. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Bye.